Hi, my name is Maureen Needfeld, and this video project is going to discuss how blindness affects stress. Imagine what it would be like to go blind. One day you can see the trees, the sky, and your friends and family. The next day, you can't see anything. This critical sense is no longer useful. What does this do to the stress response in your body? How does this affect you physically and psychologically? Is this something an individual can learn to cope with? How does an individual learn to cope with this? How do you cope with losing the loss of such a critical sense? In this video, we will try to understand what the word blind actually means. We'll explore the idea that blind people actually do experience more stress. How the lack of control and predictability of not being able to see adds to stress. We will discuss grief around losing a sense. And most importantly, we will discuss strategies for coping with vision loss and also explore resources nationally and locally for people that are blind. Many people are confused about what blindness actually is. I, for example, was confused myself even after I lost my sight. Many people think that being blind means you have absolutely no vision. You're unable to see anything, including light, but that is not actually the case. Today, the word blindness has been modified to include a wide range of visual impairments. So this means that if a person is unable to see well, and eyeglasses and surgery is not able to correct it, they are actually considered blind. Today, in the world, there are approximately 300 to 400 million blind people. These people do have varying degrees of vision, and about 50 million people experience total blindness. A person is determined to be blind if their central vision is 2200 or less, or if their field of vision is less than 20 degrees. As an individual that is completely blind and lost their sight later in life, this led me to wonder if blind people actually experience more stress. Before having my son 11 months ago, I worked for 10 years as a blindness professional at the Colorado Center for the Blind. I worked with adults who were either born blind or had lost their sight later in life. They lost their sight due to a variety of different things. I worked to teach them independent living skills. The school at which I worked was a 9-month residential intensive program that taught blind adults how to read and write Braille, use assistive technology, use a long white cane for mobility, and how to live independently with cleaning, cooking, budgeting, and doing any daily tasks that a person needs to live independently. One thing that I actually observed on a regular basis is that people who had lost their sight later in life oftentimes dealt with more anger, anxiety, and depression. I often felt that these individuals actually needed more coaching in dealing with the grief of their loss. I regularly felt like if they had regular life coaching, that they would actually benefit and be able to adapt easier. This is actually what has led me to enter this field. A study has showed that people with retinitis pigmentosa, known as RP, actually show higher incidences of stress and anxiety than those individuals that do not have RP. RP is a progressive eye condition that can leave a person completely blind. Currently, there is no cure for this disease. The lack of predictability that surrounds this eye condition leads to higher incidences of stress. The study revealed that patients with RP, that once they had a significant amount of vision loss that started to have them adapt their lifestyle, had higher levels of cortisol being released in their system. In these patients, they saw higher heart rates, higher blood pressures, and it was found that people that have RP that experience more advanced symptoms from the disease had more stress around the fear of falling and decreased mobility. It was also thought that RP patients experience stress from having to use a different level of mental focus to understand their environment. One's self-perception also added to elevated levels of stress. In another study, it was found that older adults dealing with vision loss had much higher incidences of anxiety, social phobias, and depression than those individuals that were older that were not dealing with vision loss. Social phobia was actually the number one anxiety disorder found in older individuals that dealt with vision loss. Vision loss is actually the number one leading cause of disability among older adults. It has also been shown that anxiety and depression greatly increase in these individuals, and this can also cause a decrease in the quality of life for these people. It is actually thought that older people that have vision loss are thought to be twice as likely to deal with anxiety issues and become depressed. In 2020, it is thought that depression will be the number one major cause of disease burden in the older individual population. With this high correlation between stress, depression, and anxiety and vision loss, it is actually thought that this will become a public health issue and definitely needs to be addressed. As we learned through our reading, lack of control and predictability adds to stress. There are so many different eye conditions that exist, and most of them are completely unpredictable. Many eye conditions even vary from day to day. A person with RP, for example, can go outside on a cloudy day and see pretty well, and then when the sun comes out, they are virtually totally blind. A person that has an eye condition that is degenerative has no predictability on when and even if they will eventually lose all of their vision. A person that loses their vision also loses a sense of control, an overwhelming sense of how to complete daily activities consumes a person. How will you cross the street? How will you match your clothes? How are you going to go grocery shopping? How are you going to eat dinner? How will you work, go to school, use a phone? All of these things need to be relearned, and a lack of control adds to chronic stress. People who deal with loss of their vision also have to deal with a unique sense of grief. The person that is dealing with a disability actually has a daily reminder of their grief. The person's degree of loss can keep changing, and thus they need to keep compensating on a regular basis, and the grief continues. Oftentimes, the loss of vision is sudden and is not predictable. It does not come over time, and this can lead to trauma, a loss of confidence, a loss of security, and this may lead to sleep disturbances, social isolation, nightmares, and anxiety. The length of the grief process is different for each person. Grief around vision loss can be very painful, and it requires a person to be patient with themselves. It is found, though, that with time, support, and resources, things will improve. The most critical piece to all of this is understanding that acquiring a disability, no matter what the disability is, does not mean that your life is over. There are ways to cope with these new changes. There are many resources that exist to help get to where you need to be again. I am a living example of this. I lost my sight when I was 17 years old, and I definitely dealt with the grief, the social isolation, the poor perception of myself, the stress, the anxiety, and the lack of confidence. Through coping strategies and finding resources, which becoming involved with the National Federation of the Blind, I was able to cope with my vision loss and become successful. I'm able to be active in my community, work, go to school, and be a parent. Some coping strategies include making sure to have a strong social network, try to maintain a positive, optimistic outlook, have a sense of humor, practice interdependence, understand where you may have a need, but then find where you have strengths and contribute that to others. Make sure to be kind but assertive with the things that you need. Through the Americans with Disability Act, we have a right to equal access. It is also important to know and tap into resources. There are many resources available to people with vision loss. Some resources include the National Federation of the Blind, the American Council for the Blind, American Foundation for the Blind. The acronyms are NFB, ACB, and AFB. Locally in Colorado, we have the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado. This has many different chapters and divisions that meet regularly, like the Sports and Recreation Division, Parents of Blind Children, and Blind Parents. We also have chapters that meet in all areas of the state, like Greeley, Colorado Springs, Denver, Aurora, and even a meeting that you can call into monthly called the Mountains and Plains chapter. There is also the Talking Book Library and the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. The Department of Vocational Rehabilitation is there to provide resources such as adjustment to blindness, independent living skills, mobility skills, financial assistance for school. Their ultimate goal is to get people that have vision loss to reintegrate into society and become employed. I hope that through watching this video, you have gained an understanding that blind people actually do experience more stress, but that there are ways to cope and manage this stress and become successful.